I'm writing this in a body that isn't mine, with hands that have ended empires, using eyes that have watched suns collapse. My name was Marcus Chen. I was a lance corporal in the Terran Expeditionary Marines. I was nobody, and I freed the most dangerous creature in the known galaxy because I thought I was saving her. Now I'm her, and she's out there, wearing my face, my scars, my dog tags, walking free among the fleet that's been hunting her for 3,000 years. I need you to understand what happened. I need you to know that when the war crimes tribunals begin, when they ask who unleashed the Blood Empress back into the universe, it wasn't malice, it was exhaustion, it was loneliness. It was a 23-year-old grunt who'd seen too many friends die and couldn't tell the difference between a prisoner and a victim anymore. It was me trying to be decent in a war that had stopped being decent a long time ago. The Karvathi containment war had been grinding on for 7 years when my unit got deployed to Outpost Thorn, a frozen shithole on the edge of the Veil Nebula. We called it the Splinter because everything about it hurt. The air tasted like copper and old blood. The cold went through armor, through skin, straight into your bones. We were there to guard something, but they never told us what. They never tell us anything. I remember the first time I saw Jenkins die. Not the last time, the first. We'd been on patrol, checking the perimeter sensors, when the Karvathi stealth ship dropped out of nowhere. Their plasma lances turned him into ash before he could scream. I dragged his boots back to base. They were all that was left. Command gave me a commendation and sent me back out the next day with a new partner who didn't know Jenkins' name. That's when I started wondering if we were the good guys. The outpost sat on top of an ancient Karvathi temple complex, all black stone and angles that hurt to look at. Most of it was collapsed, buried under 200 meters of ice and rock. But there was one structure still intact, sealed behind blast doors that could have stopped a supernova. We weren't supposed to go near it. Orders from Admiral Voss herself. But I pulled guard duty there every third rotation, staring at those doors for 6 hours at a stretch, wondering what they were hiding. The other Marines said it was a weapon, something the Karvathi built before they became the empire that now controlled half the galaxy. Something so terrible even they were afraid of it. I believed that for a while. The outpost housed maybe 40 personnel, Marines mostly, a few scientists from Xenotech Division who spent all their time in the lower labs and avoided eye contact. Captain Rourke ran the place like a prison warden. He was career military, the kind of officer who quoted regulations like scripture and measured success in body counts. He'd been stationed at Thorn for 3 years. That should have told me something. Command didn't leave good officers in places like this. They left the ones they wanted to forget. "Don't ask questions, Lance Corporal," he told me the first time I inquired about the sealed structure. "Don't speculate, don't investigate. You point your rifle at that door, and if anything comes through it, you turn it into vapor. That's the job. That's the only job." I nodded, said, "Yes, sir." Did what I was told, for 6 months. The nightmares started around then. I'd dream about the door opening, about something stepping through the darkness. Not a monster. Not exactly. A woman. Tall, graceful, with eyes like dying stars. She never spoke in the dreams. She just looked at me with this expression of infinite sadness, like she was watching something precious break apart and couldn't stop it. I'd wake up in the barracks, heart hammering, sheets soaked with cold sweat. Corporal Hayes in the next bunk would tell me to shut the fuck up. I'd lie there in the dark, listening to the wind howl outside, and wonder if the isolation was finally getting to me. Then the vision started during my waking hours. I'd be on duty, staring at the blast doors, and I'd see cracks in the metal that weren't there, frost spreading in patterns like text. Sometimes I heard singing, not human singing. Something older, something that resonated in my chest like a second heartbeat. The other guards never mentioned it. I didn't either. don't admit to hallucinations in a combat zone. That's how you get rotated back to Psych-Eval, lose your clearance, spend the rest of your contract shuffling supplies on some safe, boring station. I needed to stay at Thorn. Not because I wanted to, because something was pulling me there. Because every time I stood watch at those doors, I felt less alone than I had in years. That should have scared me more than it did. The war wasn't going well. We got updates every few weeks via courier drone. The Karvathi were pushing deeper into Terran space. They'd glassed New Hebron, besieged the agricultural stations around Ceres Prime. 3 billion refugees flooding into core systems that couldn't support them. Fleet Command kept promising a counteroffensive that never came. We were losing, slowly, inevitably. Like watching blood leak out of a wound you couldn't reach. Why are they so much stronger than us? Hayes asked one night in the mess. They've got better ships, better weapons, better everything. What the fuck do we even have? Spite, I said. And improvisation. That's not enough. It's all we've ever had. She didn't argue. She'd been at the Battle of Proxima Reach. She'd seen what Karvathi battle cruisers did to Terran destroyers, like watching eagles tear apart sparrows. Except we were the sparrows, and we kept showing up anyway, kept fighting, kept dying, because what else could we do? Surrender wasn't an option. The Karvathi didn't take prisoners. They took resources, planets, systems. Everything that wasn't them got categorized as raw material or target practice. That's what the briefings told us, anyway. I started spending my off hours in the base library, digging through the declassified files. The Karvathi had once been called something else. The word didn't translate cleanly, something like the Endless Dynasty or the Eternal Blood. They'd ruled 1/3 of the galaxy 30,000 years ago, back when humanity was still figuring out agriculture. Then something happened, a war, a schism. Their empire collapsed almost overnight. The fragments spent millennia scattered, broken, forgotten, until 500 years ago, when they started remembering, started rebuilding, started reclaiming what they'd lost. And now they wanted Earth's sector, because that's where their old empire had been strongest. That's where their temples and tombs and sacred sites waited, buried on worlds we'd colonized without knowing what slept beneath the surface. Outpost. Thorn sat on one of those sites. We were guarding their history, their trauma, their nightmare, and I was standing watch over something they'd locked away so thoroughly that even the memory of it had been scrubbed from their records. 3 weeks before everything went to hell, the scientists made a breakthrough. I didn't know what exactly. They didn't tell the grunts anything useful, but suddenly Rourke was on the comm every day with Fleet Command. And the Xenotech team was working double shifts, and the base went to elevated alert status without explanation. Something had changed. Something had been discovered. I was standing my shift at the blast doors when Dr. Sarah Klein came down the access corridor, tablet clutched against her chest, face pale. She stopped when she saw me. For a moment she just stared, like she was seeing me for the first time, or maybe seeing something through me. "Lance Corporal Chen," she said quietly. "How long have you been assigned to this post?" "6 months, ma'am." "Have you experienced anything unusual? Sensory anomalies? Dreams?" I kept my expression neutral. "No, ma'am." She studied me a moment longer, then nodded slowly. "If you do, report them immediately. Don't dismiss them as stress or isolation. They're symptoms of something else, something we're only beginning to understand." "What's behind the doors, Doctor?" "A mistake," she said. "A 3,000-year-old mistake that we've been making worse every day we keep her locked in there." "Her?" But Klein was already walking away, heels clicking on stone, leaving me alone with the doors and the cold and the growing certainty that everything I'd been told about this war was incomplete at best, probably a lie at worst. That night, the dreams changed. The woman with dying star eyes spoke to me for the first time. "Help me," she whispered. "Please. I never wanted this. any of this. They locked me away because I tried to stop them, because I refused to watch them burn world after world in my name. They made me their empress, and when I wouldn't be their weapon, they made me their prisoner. I woke up standing at the blast doors, barefoot, in nothing but my undershirt and combat pants, hands pressed against the freezing metal. The duty guard, Martinez, was shouting at me, demanding to know what the fuck I was doing. I couldn't answer, couldn't explain that I'd sleepwalked half a kilometer through locked corridors, past security checkpoints, straight to this spot. The doors were warm beneath my palms. Something behind them was awake. Captain Rourke confined me to quarters pending psych evaluation. Standard procedure. I should have been relieved. Should have been grateful for the break from duty, the chance to sleep in a room without ice creeping up the walls. Instead, I felt like I was suffocating. The woman's voice echoed in my head during every waking moment. She told me about her people, about the empire they'd built on the principle that some species were born to rule and others born to serve. She'd been their figurehead, their living goddess, bred and shaped and programmed from birth to embody their ideology. But she'd been curious. She'd asked questions. She'd started to wonder if maybe the species they conquered had value beyond servitude. And when she'd suggested mercy, compassion, coexistence, they'd called it corruption, weakness, heresy. They'd put her in a tomb designed to last forever, buried her beneath their holiest temple, and told their people she'd ascended to a higher plane of existence. The Empress who became light. The legend who justified every atrocity, every conquest, every genocide committed in her name. For 3,000 years, she'd been screaming in the dark while her empire used her memory to build mountains of corpses. "I don't know if I believe you," I whispered to the empty air of my quarters. "You don't have to believe me," her voice replied, closer now, intimate as a lover's breath. "You just have to be kind enough to care that I'm suffering. That's all. Just care." And God help me, I did. The psych eval came back inconclusive. Dr. Venn couldn't find anything medically wrong with me, but he recommended rotation back to a non-combat role, somewhere with less isolation, more sunlight. Rourke ignored the recommendation. We were understaffed. He needed everybody he could get, so he put me back on duty at the doors. "Whatever's in your head, Chen, you lock it down," he said. You don't let it compromise your ability to pull the trigger. Something comes through these doors. You do not hesitate. You do not question. You turn it into atoms. Clear?" "Crystals, sir." He didn't believe me. I could see it in his eyes. But he was desperate, and desperate men make bad calls. I made it 2 more weeks before I broke the seal. It happened during a maintenance cycle. The blast doors needed to cycle through their self-diagnostic routine every 30 days, some failsafe built into the ancient Karvathi tech. For exactly 90 seconds, the primary locks would disengage while the secondary systems ran their check. The doors wouldn't open. They couldn't. There were redundancies on top of redundancies, layers of security that would take a team of engineers hours to bypass. But I'd been listening to a dying Empress whisper in my head for months, and she told me exactly what to do. The moment the primary locks disengaged, I was at the control panel, fingers flying over keys I shouldn't have known how to use, entering codes that shouldn't have existed in any human database. The secondary systems screamed warnings, red lights strobed. Somewhere, an alarm began to wail. I didn't stop. The blast doors ground open 6 inches, just 6 inches, a gap barely wide enough for a body to squeeze through. Darkness poured out like liquid, not the absence of light, something more fundamental, the absence of hope, maybe, the weight of millennia compressed into shadow. And then she stepped through. She looked exactly like my dreams, tall, impossibly graceful, skin like polished obsidian, eyes that held nebulas and dying stars. She wore tattered robes that might have been elegant 3,000 years ago. Her hair fell in waves of silver white that moved like water even in the still air. She looked at me with those ancient eyes, and I saw everything, every moment of her imprisonment, every century of darkness and silence and slow, patient madness held at bay by nothing but will. "Thank you," she whispered. Behind her, I heard bootsteps, shouting. The distinctive whine of plasma rifles charging. She moved like poetry, like death. Her hand touched my chest, just above my heart, and the world inverted. Pain, screaming, my consciousness ripping free from my body like a plant torn from soil, roots and all. I was falling, drowning, burning, all at once. I saw her life in fragments. Palaces built from starlight, entire civilizations kneeling in worship, the moment she realized her people saw her as a thing instead of a person. The first time she'd tried to rebel. The betrayal. The tomb. The darkness. The endless howling, crushing loneliness. And then I was looking at myself, at my body, wearing my face, my scars, my fear. At Marcus Chen, who'd just been possessed by the Blood Empress of the Eternal Dynasty. She staggered, unsteady in my flesh. My hand came up, staring at fingers that were suddenly thick and clumsy and human. "I'm sorry," she said with my voice. "I'm so sorry. But I can't go back. I can't. I'd rather die. I'd rather burn every star in the sky than spend one more second in that tomb." Then Rourke and the Marines burst through the door, rifles raised, and she ran. She ran in my body, faster than any human should move, disappearing into the tunnel system while they opened fire, while I stood there in her body, unable to move, unable to scream, feeling power like nuclear fusion burning through veins that weren't mine. Captain Rourke looked at me, at her, at the ancient thing I'd become. "Contact Fleet Command," he said quietly. "Tell them the Empress is awake. Tell them we've lost Outpost Thorn." Then he shot me. The plasma bolt hit my chest dead center, should have killed me instantly, should have vaporized my heart, lungs, everything. Instead, I felt it pass through me like water, the energy dissipating against skin that had been forged in the hearts of stars. Blood that had been engineered to survive anything the universe could throw at it. I healed before the wound could finish forming. And I understood, finally, what I'd done, what I'd become. They kept shooting. Rourke, Martinez, Hayes, all the Marines I'd served with, ate with, bled beside. They poured enough firepower into me to level a building. Plasma, kinetic rounds, a shoulder-fired missile that turned the corridor into an inferno. The explosions knocked me down. The heat would have cooked a human alive in seconds. I stood up through the flames, untouched, and watched my friends realize they couldn't kill me. That's when the real nightmare began. Rourke ordered a full base evacuation, sealed the lower levels, and set the self-destruct sequence. Standard protocol for containment breach. Blow everything to hell, sort out the aftermath later. I was trapped in a body I didn't understand, in a facility rigged to explode, while the only person who could explain what happened was running free in my skin. I didn't try to stop them from leaving, didn't chase them. What would I say? "Wait, it's me, it's Marcus, there's been a terrible misunderstanding." They'd already made their decision. To them, I was the monster, the thing they'd been guarding against for years. The reason 3,000 Marines had died holding this frozen rock. I was the enemy. The base shook with the first detonation charges. I had maybe 10 minutes before the reactor went critical. 10 minutes to find a way out of a facility designed to contain something exactly like me. The Empress's memories flooded my consciousness like water breaching a dam. I knew this place. She'd been imprisoned here, yes, but before that, she'd ruled from here. This temple had been hers, her sanctuary, back when she still believed she could change her people from within. The architecture spoke to something deep in this alien brain. I could feel the flow of the structure, the hidden passages, the ways power and air and light moved through stone that was older than human civilization. I ran, not toward the exits the Marines were using, toward the heart of the temple, down corridors that weren't on any Terran map, following instincts that weren't mine. The body moved like liquid, tireless, every motion precise and efficient. I could feel the power coiled in these muscles, could sense the latent abilities bred into this form over millions of years of careful genetic cultivation. The Karvathi hadn't just built an empire. They'd built themselves into living weapons, and I was wearing their greatest masterpiece. I found the escape route 3 levels below the main complex. A launch bay carved into the mountain itself, housing a ship that looked like it had been grown rather than built. Organic curves, dark metal that shifted colors in the emergency lights, symbols etched into the hull that my human mind couldn't read, but my new eyes understood instantly. It was her ship, the Empress's personal vessel, sealed away when they'd imprisoned her, waiting for a return that never came. Until now, I didn't know how to fly it. Marcus Chen, Lance Corporal, barely qualified on atmospheric shuttles. But the Empress had logged thousands of hours in this cockpit, and her muscle memory was now mine. My hands moved over controls that responded to touch and thought. The ship coming alive with a sound like a heartbeat. Systems that had slept for millennia warming up in seconds. The launch bay doors refused to open. The base's self-destruct had locked down everything. But this ship had been designed to punch through capital-class warship armor. A few meters of reinforced stone barely slowed it down. I launched straight up through solid rock, the ship's shield carving a tunnel as I went, erupting from the side of the mountain in a spray of ice and debris just as the reactor went critical behind me. The explosion lit up the night like a second sun, vaporizing Outpost Thorn and everything in it. I was free and completely, utterly alone. I set course for deep space, somewhere far from Terran patrols and Karvathi battle fleets, and tried to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do now. The ship had a medical bay. I spent hours there, staring at myself in reflective surfaces, trying to reconcile what I saw with who I'd been. The face looking back wasn't human, wasn't anything close, but it wasn't monstrous either. Just other, elegant and terrible and old, beyond measure. I'd expected to hate it, hate her for what she'd done to me. Instead, I felt her grief like a physical weight. 3,000 years of isolation, of being used as a symbol while the person inside screamed unheard. She hadn't wanted to swap bodies. She'd been desperate, cornered, choosing the only escape available, even knowing what it would cost me. Just like I'd chosen to open those doors even knowing it might doom everyone. We were both guilty, both victims, both trying to survive in a universe that ground people into fuel for larger machines. The ship's computer was more sophisticated than any AI I'd encountered. It had been her confidant, her only companion during the years before her imprisonment. It called me "Your Radiance," and tried to treat me like the Empress I appeared to be. "I'm not her," I said. "I'm human. My name is Marcus Chen." The computer processed this for a long moment. "That is unexpected. What has happened to the true Radiance?" So I told it, everything. The war, the imprisonment, the swap. When I finished, the computer was silent for so long I thought it had crashed. "She would not have done this lightly," it finally said. "The ritual she performed, the consciousness transfer, it is forbidden. Costs more than most beings can pay. She knew this. But she also knew that if she died in that tomb, if she gave up, then her people would continue using her memory to justify their conquests. Better to escape in the body of a human soldier than to remain a ghost they could parade forever. She left me to die. No, She left you with power, with knowledge, with the one thing that might end this war without destroying both our species in the process. What thing? The truth. The Empress that was, is the only being alive who knows why the Eternal Dynasty really fell, why her people scattered, what they're truly afraid of, and now that knowledge lives in you. The implications crashed over me like a tidal wave. The Karvathi weren't just conquering for resources or territory, they were running, fleeing from something, trying to rebuild their strength before whatever had shattered their empire came back to finish the job. And the woman they'd imprisoned was the one person who knew what that threat was. I spent weeks alone in that ship, diving deep into the Empress's memories, trying to piece together the puzzle. It wasn't easy. Consciousness transfer was messy. I had access to her knowledge, but not always the context. It was like reading a book with half the pages missing, trying to reconstruct the story from fragments and implications. What I learned kept me awake during the ship's night cycles, staring at stars that suddenly seemed a lot less eternal. The Karvathi hadn't conquered the galaxy through strength. They'd done it through genetic engineering, creating specialized castes for every task, warriors, thinkers, workers, leaders. They'd been efficient, ruthless, convinced of their superiority, and for 20,000 years it had worked. Then they'd encountered another species. The Empress's memories of them were fragmented, corrupted by trauma and time. I caught glimpses of beings that didn't obey physics the way we understood it, that moved through space-time like humans moved through air. They hadn't been hostile, hadn't attacked. They'd simply existed, and their existence had broken something fundamental in Karvathi philosophy. If another species could be more advanced, more powerful, more sophisticated than the Eternal Dynasty, then what did that make the Karvathi? What did it say about the empire they'd built on the principle of inherent superiority? Some of the Karvathi had wanted to learn from these beings, to adapt, to grow. The Empress had been one of them, but the majority had chosen fear, isolation. They'd decided that if they couldn't be the apex civilization, then they'd destroy any evidence that they weren't. They'd attacked these other beings, tried to wipe them out, erase them from history, and failed. The counterattack had been swift and absolute. Not a war, a correction. The other species had simply undone the Karvathi Empire, dismantled it with the casual efficiency of someone pruning a garden. They'd scattered the dynasty across the galaxy, crippled their technology, reduced them to fragments. Then they'd left, vanished back to wherever they'd come from. Job done. The Empress had tried to stop it, had begged her people to surrender, to negotiate, to accept that they weren't gods. For that, they'd called her traitor, heretic, the one who'd brought the wrath of the universe down on their heads. They'd locked her away so her voice couldn't contaminate the survivors, and they'd spent the next 3,000 years rebuilding, reconquering, determined to restore their empire to its former glory, never realizing or refusing to admit that if they succeeded, if they made themselves visible enough, powerful enough, the beings who'd destroyed them once might come back to finish the job. The Karvathi were building a funeral pyre and calling it destiny, and humanity was in the way. I needed to warn someone, but who? Fleet Command would shoot me on sight. The Karvathi would kill me for being a traitor wearing the Empress's face. I was caught between two species that saw me as an enemy, carrying information that neither wanted to hear. That's when I picked up the distress signal, a human ship, civilian transport, under attack by Karvathi raiders. They were close, maybe 6 hours away at full burn. The transport wouldn't last that long. I could hear the panic in their transmissions, the screams, the sound of hull breaches and decompression alarms. I could ignore it. Should ignore it. I wasn't human anymore. Wasn't part of that fight. Whatever happened out here wasn't my responsibility, but I was still Marcus Chen. Still the kid who'd joined the Marines because he'd believed in protecting people. Still the soldier who'd freed a prisoner because he couldn't stand the thought of anyone suffering alone in the dark. Still human, even if my body wasn't. I changed course and pushed the engines to maximum. The ship responded like a living thing, eager, hungry for action after 3,000 years of dormancy. We hit the combat zone with weapons hot, shields at full, and I had exactly zero idea how to fight in a starship battle. Turned out, I didn't need to know. The Empress had been bred for war, her people's greatest general before she'd become their icon. Every combat instinct, every tactical calculation, every predatory reflex was encoded in this body at a cellular level. When I saw the Karvathi raiders, 3 destroyers and a cruiser, circling the crippled transport like sharks, my hands moved before my mind could catch up. The weapon systems came online with thought commands, the ship's AI translating my intent into action. I didn't fire missiles or lasers. The Empress's vessel was older than that, from an era when Karvathi warfare was more personal. I fired shadows. That's the only way I can describe it. Weapons that bent light and space, that reached out and unmade matter at the quantum level. The first raider simply ceased to exist, there 1 second and gone the next. No explosion, no debris, just erasure. The others scattered, confused, trying to acquire a target they couldn't quite see. My ship moved through their defensive perimeter like smoke, like nightmare, like everything they'd been taught to fear about the old empire. I destroyed the second raider with the same casual efficiency. The third managed to get a few shots off, plasma that splashed harmlessly against my shields. I felt almost bad for them. They were fighting with technology their ancestors had developed to conquer inferior species. I was using weapons designed to fight gods. The cruiser tried to run. I let it. Transmitted a message on all Karvathi frequencies. The Empress has returned. Tell your masters. Tell them she knows what they're running from. Tell them hiding won't save them. Then I docked with the human transport. The crew was young. 20, maybe 30 people, mostly refugees from the Ceres Prime evacuation, trying to make it to the outer colonies. They watched me through the airlock with expressions caught between hope and terror. I didn't look human, didn't sound human, but I'd saved them. "You're safe," I said, my voice carrying harmonics that human vocal cords couldn't produce. "The raiders are gone. Do you need medical assistance?" The captain, a woman maybe 40 years old, grey hair tied back, haunted eyes, stepped forward slowly. "What are you?" "That's complicated. I'm a friend, sort of. It's a really long story." "You're Karvathi?" "I'm wearing a Karvathi body. Inside, I'm human. My name is Chen, Lance Corporal, Terran Expeditionary Marines." I held up hands that were too elegant, too deadly. "There was an accident, a transfer. I know it's hard to believe, but I'm on your side." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I'm Captain Rodriguez. That was some flying out there. Where'd you learn combat maneuvers like that?" "Muscle memory. The body remembers even when the mind doesn't. We got her ship patched enough for basic life support. I fabricated repair materials from my ship's matter synthesizers, technology that made the captain's eyes go wide, and helped seal the hull breaches. Worked alongside her crew, feeling their fear and gratitude in equal measure. They didn't trust me, couldn't, but they needed me, and right now that was enough." "Where are you headed?" I asked Rodriguez when the repairs were complete. "Deep Hope Station. It's an independent colony outside Terran jurisdiction. They take refugees, don't ask questions." She paused. "You could come with us. I mean, if you need somewhere to go." "Would they accept me?" "They accept everyone. That's kind of their whole thing." She smiled, tired but genuine. "Besides, you saved our lives. That counts for something." I thought about it. About spending more weeks alone in this ship, carrying knowledge too dangerous to keep and too important to ignore. About the Empress wearing my body somewhere out there, probably scared, definitely hunted. about the war grinding on, consuming lives, while both sides remained ignorant of the real threat lurking in the background. About what Marcus Chen would do if he was still human, still bound by duty and conscience and the stubborn belief that one person could make a difference. "I need to find someone," I said. "Someone who's wearing my old body. But after that, yeah, maybe deep hope would be good. Maybe I could use some humanity, even if I'm not human anymore." "What happened to your body?" one of the crew asked. A kid, couldn't be more than 19, so I told them the whole story. Outpost Thorn, the doors, the Empress, the swap. By the time I finished, they were staring at me like I'd grown a second head. "That's the most fucked up thing I've ever heard," the kid said. "Yeah," I agreed. "Yeah, it really is." Deep Hope Station turned out to be exactly what Rodriguez promised. A massive, ring-shaped structure orbiting a dead star, home to maybe 50,000 people from 100 different worlds. Refugees, outcasts, deserters, anyone running from something. The kind of place where nobody looked too closely at your past as long as you pulled your weight. I docked at the commercial sector and immediately felt the stares. Karvathi were rare this far into neutral space, and one traveling alone in an ancient warship was downright unprecedented. The station security, a loose coalition of volunteers with mismatched armor and old weapons, kept their distance but tracked my every move. I didn't blame them. If I'd seen something like me walk into my station, I'd be nervous too. The first week I kept to myself, stayed in my ship, monitored galactic news feeds, searched for any sign of the Empress. She'd vanished completely after Outpost Thorn. No Terran reports, no Karvathi intelligence chatter. Either she was dead, or she'd gotten very good at hiding in my body. I hoped it was the latter. Selfishly, maybe. But I needed to know she was okay. Needed to know that what I'd lost had been worth something. Rodriguez found me on the 8th day, knocked on my hull with a bottle of something that claimed to be whiskey. "You've been hiding," she said when I opened the airlock. "That's not good for you. Trust me, I've tried it." "I'm dangerous," I said. "People should stay away." "Bullshit. You're scared. There's a difference." She pushed past me into the ship's common area, looked around at the alien architecture with casual interest. "You know what I've learned in 20 years of running refugees? The most dangerous people are the ones who've stopped caring. You care. That makes you salvageable." She poured 2 glasses of whiskey without asking, handed me one. We drank in silence for a while. "The station council wants to meet you," she finally said. "They've heard about the raid, about what you did. They want to know if you're staying." "What did you tell them?" "That you're a confused kid in a scary body who did the right thing when it mattered. Which, as far as I can tell, is about 90% accurate." She smiled. "The other 10% is way more complicated, but they don't need to know that yet." I met with the council the next day. 12 people from different species, all of them refugees themselves, all of them hardened by loss and survival. They listened to my story, a more careful version, edited for public consumption, and asked pointed questions about my intentions. "Oh, we can't have a weapon of mass destruction parked on our station," said Councillor Venn, a Terran woman with burn scars covering half her face. No offense intended. None taken. I get it. "But we also can't turn away someone who saved a transport full of people," added Councillor Kresh, an insectoid whose species I didn't recognize. "That would violate everything we've built here." "So, what do you propose?" I asked. "That we hire you," said the third councillor, a Karvathi male who'd introduced himself as Vorath. "Security consultant. We've got raiders hitting supply convoys every other week, pirates who think we're easy targets. You demonstrated significant combat capabilities. We could use someone like you." "You'd trust a Karvathi to protect human refugees." "You're not Karvathi," Vorath said quietly. Not really. And I'm not what I was born to be either. None of us here are. That's the whole point. So I took the job. For 6 months, I flew escort missions, drove off pirates, learned to fight with precision instead of overwhelming force. I learned to be part of a community again. People still feared me. Couldn't help it. I looked like their worst nightmare, but they also started to see past the body to the person inside. Rodriguez became my friend, probably my only real friend. She'd lost her family at New Hebron, watched the Karvathi glass her homeworld, and somehow still found room in her heart to see me as something other than the enemy. "You remind me of my daughter," she told me one night, both of us drunk on terrible station moonshine. She was always trying to fix things, save people, got her killed in the end, stayed behind to evacuate civilians when the bombers came. I'm sorry. Don't be. She died being exactly who she wanted to be. Not many people get that. Rodriguez looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. You're doing the same thing, you know, being who you are despite the body, despite everything. That takes guts. But it wasn't enough. I could feel time running out. The war was escalating. The Karvathi were pushing harder, getting more desperate. And somewhere in my old body, the Empress was planning something. I could feel it like a splinter in my mind, a connection we still shared through the botched transfer. Then the message came through. Deep space transmission. Encrypted with codes I shouldn't know, but the Empress's muscle memory recognized instantly. When I decrypted it, I found coordinates and a single line of text. Come alone. I'm sorry. Please. It was a trap, obviously, possibly by the Empress herself, possibly by someone who'd captured her. Every tactical instinct screamed at me to ignore it, to stay safe, to let someone else deal with whatever clusterfuck was waiting at those coordinates. But Marcus Chen had never been good at taking the safe option. I told Rodriguez where I was going, left her instructions for what to do if I didn't come back, how to access my ship's technology, who to contact, where to find the full records of everything I'd learned about the Karvathi and their hidden history. She tried to talk me out of it. When that failed, she tried to come with me. "This isn't your fight," I said. "You're my friend. That makes it my fight. Rodriguez, if this goes wrong, then you'll die alone in deep space and I'll live with the regret. Or we'll face it together, and at least you won't be alone." She smiled, that tired, genuine smile. "Your choice." I hugged her, carefully, mindful of the strength in these arms. "Thank you. But this is something I have to do myself. The connection I have with the Empress, it's personal, intimate. I need to face her alone." The coordinates led to a shattered moon in unclaimed space. Radiation levels that would kill an unshielded human in minutes. No atmosphere, no life, just broken rock drifting in the void. And one structure, a Karvathi observation post, ancient and abandoned. My ship detected another vessel in orbit. Human design. Terran military, actually. A scout ship that should have been scrapped years ago but had been kept running through sheer stubborn engineering. She was here, in my body, waiting. I landed next to the scout ship and made my way into the observation post. The interior was dark, life support barely functioning. I found her in what used to be the command center, sitting in my body, wearing my face, looking at stars through a cracked viewport. "Hello, Marcus," she said with my voice. "Hello, Your Radiance." She flinched at the title. "Don't. I'm not that anymore. I'm not sure what I am." I moved closer, carefully. She'd kept my body in good shape, maybe even improved it. Faster reflexes, better muscle tone, but there was something else, a weariness that went deeper than physical exhaustion. "You've been running," I said, "for 6 months, staying ahead of both fleets. Your people want to dissect me, figure out how the transfer worked. My people want to kill me for escaping, for failing them again." She turned to face me, and I saw tears on my old face. I thought freedom would feel different, better. But I'm still in a cage, just a bigger one. Why did you call me here? Because I'm dying. The body is rejecting me. Humans aren't designed to hold Karvathi consciousness. The neural pathways are wrong. Every day I feel more of myself eroding and more of you bleeding through. She held up my hands, her hands now, and they were shaking. I have maybe a week before the transfer completes in reverse. Before I dissolve completely and Marcus Chen comes back to himself with no memory of any of this. Then we need to switch back now, while there's still time. I can't. The ritual only works once per lifetime. The price has already been paid. She smiled, sad and ancient and tired. But I can give you something better, all my knowledge. Everything I know about the war, about my people, about what's really coming. I can burn it all into your human consciousness before I fade. You'll have the power you're wearing and the truth you need to end this. That will kill you. I've been dead for 3,000 years, Marcus. I've just been too stubborn to admit it. She stepped closer. Let me do this. Let me make my death mean something. Please. I wanted to argue, wanted to find another way. But I'd lived in her head for 6 months, felt her memories, understood her pain. She wasn't asking for mercy. She was asking for purpose, for the chance to matter in a way she'd never been allowed to during her life. What do? I asked. The ritual took hours. She walked me through it, pressing our hands against my temples, initiating a consciousness transfer that was less violent than the first, but infinitely more final. I felt her knowledge pouring into me like molten metal, burning pathways into my brain, rewriting memories, adding layers of experience and understanding that no human mind was meant to hold. I learned the true name of the species that had destroyed the Karvathi Empire, learned that they were still out there, watching, waiting to see if the eternal dynasty would learn humility or need to be dismantled again. I learned the location of ancient weapons, hidden archives, everything the Karvathi had tried to bury about their own history. And I learned that the war with humanity was pointless, a distraction. The Karvathi conquering Terran space wasn't about resources or territory. It was about surrounding themselves with lesser species, creating a buffer, proving to themselves that they were still powerful, still relevant. It was fear wearing the mask of supremacy. The transfer completed just as station proximity alarms began wailing. Both fleets had found us. Terran battlecruisers on one side, Karvathi warspheres on the other. They'd tracked our ships, followed us here, and now they were closing in for what they thought would be a simple kill. The Empress, what remained of her, looked at me with fading eyes. You have to stop them. Both sides, or everything I've suffered, everything you've sacrificed, will mean nothing. How? I'm one person in one ship. No, you're the Empress of the Eternal Dynasty, carrying the memories and authority of 3,000 years of rule. And you're Marcus Chen, human soldier who proved that compassion and courage matter more than power. She smiled. You're the bridge between two species that are about to destroy each other for all the wrong reasons. So build that bridge. Show them what you showed me. She died in my arms, just stopped breathing, stopped existing. The last fragments of an ancient consciousness, finally allowed to rest. I held my old body and felt grief and relief and gratitude all tangled together into something I had no words for. Then I went to stop a war. I flew straight between the fleets, broadcasting on all frequencies, using every scrap of authority and desperation I could muster. This is the Empress of the Eternal Dynasty. I am ordering an immediate ceasefire. Any vessel that fires will be considered an enemy of both empires. Silence. Then chaos. Demands for confirmation, threats, accusations, confusion from both sides. I know what you're thinking, I continued. Both of you. The Terrans think I'm the monster who escaped Outpost Thorn, The Karvathi think I'm the traitor who abandoned them. You're both right, and both wrong. I took a breath that these lungs didn't need. I'm going to tell you a story about an empire that conquered the galaxy and the species that reminded them they weren't gods. About a war that never should have started and a truth that both sides have been running from. And then I'm going to give you a choice. I told them everything. The real history of the Eternal Dynasty. The beings that had humbled them. The fact that the Karvathi were terrified, not superior. That they were fighting humanity not because they needed Terran space, but because they needed someone weaker to conquer, to prove to themselves that they still mattered. And I told the Terrans about Outpost Thorn, about the woman imprisoned there, the consciousness transfer, about Marcus Chen who'd just been trying to do the right thing and ended up changing everything. Here's the choice, I said. You can keep fighting, keep dying, keep grinding each other into dust while the universe watches and judges. Or you can stop. Both of you. Now. Ceasefire. Negotiations. Real ones. Where both sides actually listen. Where you admit that maybe, just maybe, you're not so different. That you're both scared species doing terrible things because you think it's the only way to survive. Admiral Voss herself responded, her voice cold with fury. You're a deserter wearing a war criminal's body. Why should we listen to anything you say? Because I'm the only one who's lived in both sides, who's felt your fear and their arrogance and understand that underneath it all, you're the same. You're people, flawed, frightened, desperate people trying to protect what you love. I paused. And because if you don't stop, the beings that destroyed the Eternal Dynasty once will come back, and this time they won't just scatter you, they'll erase both species from existence. Silence stretched across the void. Then a Karvathi commander spoke, his voice shaking with something between rage and terror. You speak of the silence, the unnamed. They are myth. They're real. I have their coordinates in my head. The Empress hid them for 3,000 years because she knew if her people found them, they'd try to attack again out of wounded pride. But I'm done hiding truths because they're inconvenient. I transmitted the data. There. Now you both know. Now you can choose. War with each other or survival together. I really don't care which. I'm tired. I've done what I could. The rest is up to you. I cut the transmission and prepared for both fleets to open fire, to decide that killing me was easier than facing the truth I'd just dumped in their laps. Instead, something impossible happened. Admiral Voss called for a ceasefire, temporary, probationary, contingent on about 1,000 conditions. But a ceasefire. 3 hours later, the Karvathi Supreme Commander did the same. It wasn't peace, not even close. But it was a pause, a breath, a chance. That was 8 months ago. The negotiations are still ongoing at Deep Hope Station, neutral ground, where both species can talk without old ghosts haunting every word. I attend sometimes when they need me to clarify some detail about the Empress's memories or the history I carry. Mostly, I stay out of it. Let them figure it out for themselves. I'm still getting used to this body. Still learning what it means to be Marcus Chen wearing the face of an empire. The nightmares have faded. The grief remains, but it's gentler now, like an old wound that's finally healing. Rodriguez was promoted to senior counselor. She uses the position to push for refugee rights, for accountability, for the kind of practical compassion that holds civilizations together. She visits my ship every week, brings terrible whiskey, tells me stories about the station. Sometimes she asks if I regret it. The door, the choice. Everything that followed. I don't know how to answer that. I lost my humanity, lost my body, my identity, my chance at a normal life, but I gained something too. Understanding, purpose, the knowledge that even at the bottom of the universe, even when everything seems hopeless, One person making one decent choice can matter. The Empress told me once, in those final moments, that I'd shown her something she'd forgotten. That compassion wasn't weakness. That caring about suffering, even the suffering of your enemies, was the most powerful thing a being could do. I think she was right. I'm Marcus Chen. I'm the Blood Empress of the Eternal Dynasty. I'm neither and both, and something new that doesn't have a name yet. I freed a prisoner because she was suffering, and she gave me the power to end a war. That's enough. That's more than enough. And when I stand at the viewport of my ancient ship, looking at stars that have watched empires rise and fall and rise again, I understand finally what she'd been trying to tell me all along. We're all prisoners in some way. All caged by fear, by history, by the stories we tell ourselves about who we have to be. Freedom isn't about the body you're wearing or the power you hold. It's about choosing, in every moment, to be kind when you could be cruel, to be brave when you could be safe, to reach out your hand to someone suffering in the dark, even when you know it might cost you everything. That's humanity, not flesh, not blood, not DNA. It's the choice, the eternal, impossible, beautiful choice to care. I'm still human. In all the ways that matter, I'm still human, and I always will be.